Welcome back, value investors. Semiconductor stock prices are really high. I thought they were really high 6 months ago, and now they're even higher to the point where I think it's just way too overpriced. And I'm expecting that this space is going to repeat history and really punish investors that bought into companies that were overpriced or maybe stayed in a stock too long. And I'd like to share with you some information, some historical examples, and some conclusions that I think are going to occur in the semiconductor industry. Now, this video is not meant to badmouth any of the companies I'm covering. I think all the companies that I cover are exceptional companies. I'm just a value investor, and I love covering companies and getting a fair price on a great company or a discounted price on a company that is on the rebound. And in this case here, I just believe that the semiconductor industry, the prices have gotten way too high. You cannot substantiate the prices that these stocks are being sold at. And I substantiate it by doing a discounted free cash flow analysis, earnings per share. And I'd like to share a few examples of that. I'd also like to share historical information that leads me to believe that in the semiconductor industry, this has happened before. And the fall was very painful. And I'd like to show that example to you. I'd love to hear what you think. Please provide your comments. Please keep it positive and productive. I'm a value investor. I'm sharing my analysis with you. I'm not recommending you buy or sell any of the stocks I cover. I'm just sharing my journey as an investor. And hopefully it's helpful to you to hear one more investor's opinion on an industry and how I go about investing in companies. I'd love to learn from you, and I would really appreciate comments on this video. Now let's get into the semiconductor industry. Over the past year, the S&P index has done really well. It's up 27%. And a good part of that rise is because the catalyst has been information technology. Information technology has been the number one sector within the S&P, especially those large cap stocks. Within this sector are certain industries, and I wanted to go deeper into what industries make up technology and the performance that I'm seeing in those particular industries. So information technology as a sector is up 56% in 1 year. Year to date, it's up 13%, 3 months, 19%, over the last month, almost 6%. But if you look at the semiconductor industry, which is part of the sector, over 1 year, it's up 131%. Incredible. In year to date, it's up 44%. In 3 months, up 64%. Why is it going parabolic? First question is 131%. And again, the compare is between early March of 24 to early March of 23. We were already out of the trough period in 22, maybe by about 5 months. So it's not comparing to a low point. And my logic would tell me that the semiconductor industry, it didn't automatically start selling twice as much revenue and generating twice as much profit and twice as much cash flow. Nowhere near that. One company is doing that, and that's Nvidia. And I'll cover that example independently. But in general, this just looks really out of whack. Why is the semiconductor industry, the prices on stocks for this industry, so darn high? I wanted to take a close look at one of the biggest ETFs for semiconductor companies. And I looked at the semiconductor ETF that had the most history. This ETF goes back into the heydays of the dot-com bubble. And it shows that back in the day, the semiconductor companies really did see a very big rise in stock prices that was followed by a 78% drop in this ETF price. 78%. As recently as 2022, the semiconductor industry had a drop of 44%. This industry is cyclical. There are boom periods and then bust periods. This shows two bust periods clearly. The other thing I'll point out is in the dot-com bubble era, that 78% correction, it would have taken an investor that bought at the high basically 17 years to get back to even. That's how far down it went down. Now we're seeing this parabolic move in this ETF. And it looks to me, I'm suspicious that this is just, a lot of this is artificial. It's not based on revenue growth. profitability growth, free cash flow growth. It's really speculation that the AI craze is going to be something big. Not sure how big, but it's going to be big. Well, can't put a number on big. I could just put a number on, cash flow projections and so forth. And this again is evidence that a move that we're seeing in this ETF very recently, this parabolic move, is evidence that, hey, we are probably seeing a pretty good bubble within this industry, and it's likely going to either pop or the air is going to be let out of this bubble at some point. One company that's been there for a long time is Intel. They've been a semiconductor company for a long time, and they rode the dot-com boom. And think about the demand on Intel during that period. A lot of people were buying PCs for the first time in their lifetime. Businesses were buying PCs, pretty much across the board to make their employees more productive. Students went from learning strictly out of books and paper, to using computers to write their term papers, to do all the different arithmetic and mathematics and sciences. So the build of PCs to put PCs in the hands of all the different users, the variety of users, was massive. And you look at Intel's rise, it was parabolic. And the fall of Intel was painful. From the high that they experienced around the year 2000, and really over a couple of years, the stock dropped 77%. And Intel's never regained the price that it was trading at. So that's really incredible to see that if you're an investor in Intel at the peak, you're still losing money. And that was 23 years ago. That's pretty incredible. And as I look at the rise in, for example, Nvidia, it's taking on this type of curve. How far will it drop? I don't know. But there's no stock in the history of the stock market that stays on a rise of this steep angle. It's impossible. At that rate, um, an Nvidia-like stock would probably represent half, if not three-quarters of the value of the stock market, which would be not beyond ridiculous. It's unimaginable. So I wanted to show how Intel, historically, what happened when the stock got really pumped up for good reason. PCs were being sold. The main CPU that was being used by computers was made by Intel. There was humongous demand. There was real demand for Intel, but the stock just got ahead of itself by a big margin. Here's a list of the individual companies that make up the semiconductor industry. And these, starting with Nvidia, this company was worth a fourth of what it's worth today 16 months ago. It's up 300% in 1 year. Incredible. I've done a video on Nvidia recently. It's on my channel. And I believe that there's a premium on Nvidia of 30%. My determination of value in Nvidia takes a very optimistic outlook on what they're going to do with their revenues, free cash flows, and earnings per share. So it's not like I'm intending on making them look, less desirable than anything. I think my video was clear that I'm taking an optimistic position on Nvidia, but even with an optimistic position, I just think the price is way too high. TSM, I've owned TSM for years. I made money on TSM. I tripled my money on TSM and then sold my position. They are the second biggest semiconductor company in this industry. And I've done a TSM video on my channel as well. I believe they're overpriced by 40%. Broadcom is a stock I owned up until the October timeframe of 2023. Good company. I thought that they had a very good proposition for an investor, good dividend, good free cash flows. And their stock is up 130%. I exited Broadcom with a very good gain. And I've seen the stock rise even further, which is good for all the stockholders of Broadcom that stayed. Congratulations. But I just think that stock's just really run up. I don't understand how Broadcom has a direct connection to the AI business plans. I understand how NVIDIA GPUs have a direct path with the AI build out. I think Broadcom will benefit from it, but Broadcom has a variety of businesses. They built their business with the wireless, smartphone industry. So that was another unexplainable reasoning of why the stock price was just flourishing in the AI craze. So I exited Broadcom, And although it's interesting and a bitter pill to swallow, frankly, that I didn't participate in the latest, I guess, 5 months of the upside on Broadcom, I believe that the stock is overpriced by 22% at this time. And they just announced their earnings. And when they announced their earnings, I took their financials and I updated my analysis. I also used a very optimistic point of view so that I would see, can I get what valuation do I get if I think that Broadcom will execute on their business the way they intend to. Now, Broadcom's guidance for the rest of the year was not good enough, and the stock dropped almost 7%. It also brought all the other semiconductor companies. This is Friday's trading. It just closed. And, one day doesn't give you a trend, but it's interesting to see how, they exceeded expectations on their earnings, meaning they had more profit, better cash flow than expected, but their forecast wasn't good enough because I believe the price that people are putting on Broadcom expects phenomenal growth, and all they can do is deliver good growth. So we'll see how things play out, and we'll see how the Broadcom stock goes. The last company that I have done evaluation on is Intel. I believe Intel is overpriced by about 10%, and Intel is up 83%, but that's a different, kind of bag of worms. Reason for it is Intel has had their fair share of business problems, and I think they were recovering from a very low price point. And I think they're going to participate in some of this AI build out. I think they'll benefit from it. But that's where I stand there. Just pointing out some more examples. AMD is up 157%. I haven't analyzed AMD, but I would imagine their revenues didn't go up by 157%. Their profitability didn't go up by 157%. It's not expected their free cash flows are going to go up by 150%. So what substantiates a move on the price of 157% on an Intel? So there are other examples here just showing just the humongous move of these stock prices within this industry. So it leads me to believe that there's just the AI hype has gotten under control, out of control in the semiconductor space. And this is troubled waters that I'm going to be careful as I look at companies that are in this industry. So I took the five biggest companies and I'm going to look at the charts of these companies. The 1-day chart is mentioned. Broadcom exceeded expectations on their earnings, but their forecast wasn't as good as investors wanted. The stock dropped 7%. So it's not my imagination that there is concern that prices are too high. When a company exceeds expectations, but the forecast is just not good enough, it was a good forecast, but they didn't restate it and say, oh, we're going to grow even more. So investors were pulling out of Broadcom, and that brought the whole space down. So I don't think I'm the only one thinking along these lines that this space is overpriced. Looking at the same companies year to date, Nvidia's up 81%. That's just incredible. It's incredible to see a stock just take off like that. But again, price is what you pay, value is what you get. I wonder if the stock is worth 600 per share. Hell, it might be worth $1,000 per share. But we will see. Father Time will tell us what Nvidia is worth over the next year to 2 years. Broadcom, as mentioned, it's up 20% after that 7% drop. AMD is up 50%. Incredible. And these other companies are up a significant amount as well, just year to date. Looking at the 1-year chart for the same companies, Nvidia's up 273%, which is incredible. And they really separated themselves from the rest of the semiconductor industry. And I can understand that, their GPUs are different. Their GPUs are the top performing GPUs, and they're going to be in high demand. So I don't have a problem with them separating themselves from the others, but just the parabolic move that we've seen since January to this point is really, really overdone. The rise in the semiconductor industry has been super incredible, and we'll see how this ends. It'll be interesting to see if it trades sideways for a while and maybe even goes up even higher. That'll be incredible. But I'm not the only one out there really pointing this out. I was watching a respected channel, YouTube channel, one of the big analysts, big respected person. He pointed out that the semiconductor industry or the stocks in the semiconductor space now represent 10% of the S&P, 10%. And that's a big, big portion of the S&P when you consider how many different industries are included in the S&P. So the concern that this space is going to drop is I'm not the only one out there saying it. I'd love to get your comments on it and understand what you think is going to happen, and would be really interested in reading those. I hope you found the video interesting, and I really appreciate you watching.